All right, what's good? Golden Mike podcast with your boy Marc Cordon. If we haven't met, I help people disrupt the status quo on large stages by getting on stages like TEDx, or creating even a digital course, or by a podcast like we're doing right now. I am so stoked to have today's guest. Number one is we have had the opportunity to get to know each other in the past couple months. I consider her a friend. I consider her someone that I can confide in. And we're going to go and run the gamut of things, from maybe inclusion, mindfulness, happiness, connection, and relationships. Are you into that? Stick around, because that's who I'm going to bring on right now. She's a transformative life coach, a speaker, and a catalyst for positive change. Bara Mann, what are you doing on my show right now? What's going on?
Hey, Mark, I'm super happy to be here with you.
Yeah, I've been waiting for this opportunity since we met a couple of months ago. I'm so excited to have you here. Now, we've got a lot of topics to cover, but before we even go there, I wanted to start out by just sort of getting to know like little Bara, what things were like. Were you already thinking about holistic health when you were 3 years old? Like, what was going on in your world as you were growing up?
Little Bara grew up in a really small expat community in Indonesia, a town called Loksamaui. Once I started school at like 4 years old, there were typically about 26 kids in the whole school, pre-K to 8th grade. And so little Bara was really focused on belonging. Because if you didn't fit in, it meant that you might have no friends. And I saw that happen to some other kids. So little Bara desperately wanted to fit in and be part of the pack.
Were you like, was your situation a place where like, do you identify as white? I mean,
Yes.
I don't want to assume that you're. Was it all other white kids, or were you already kind of sticking out because you were like one of a few white kids?
It was all other white kids, pretty much. It was an international school that was
Got
like
it.
99% Americans and Canadians. Occasionally, someone would roll in from a non-white country, but that was pretty rare.
So when you were seeing someone like stick out, what were some of the things that you didn't want to stick out from? Why did you not want to be like one of these things is not like the other?
It's funny because this changed over time. We kind of had to create our own culture over there. There's actually a phenomenon, I guess. Maybe that's the wrong word, but now it's known as a third culture kid. We didn't have American culture. We weren't Indonesians. So we'd pick different things that fit in and that didn't. One of the funniest ones that stands out to me from the end of my time there was when one of the kids graduated 8th grade, so they had to go to boarding school, and they came back and she was shaving her legs. And we were like, this weirdo shaving her legs. And then,
Nice.
yeah. And then a couple years later, when I moved to the U.S., I was on the other end of that spectrum, and that was really uncomfortable.
Well, I hope you don't look at me differently because I just shaved my legs for this episode, my friend.
Well, I feel honored.
Yeah, absolutely. I only do it with the people who I look up to the most. Talk a little bit more about like, number one is this third culture. We could talk about this for like a whole mini course if we wanted to, but like, it's like, for me, it was the same thing, the third culture, where it was like, on one end, here I am growing up in the United States, wanting to be like everybody else, wanting to be the kid on Saves by the Bell, and in many ways, I wasn't. I did not look like anything on the media, and here I was at the other side of things with my parents speaking like 3 different languages in the house, and English wasn't one of them. And like, when I'd want to lean into my Filipino heritage, I was too American for that. And in some way, shape, or form, like there was this, not at the time, but like there was this opportunity to create this third identity, one in which it pulls in the other 2 identities while creating something new for them. Is that sort of the roots between in terms of what you're doing now when it comes to empowerment and inclusion?
Yeah, I think that's a lot of it. And I love that you asked that question and that you shared your experience with that. And especially that you referred to identity, because One of the things that I think is so important is to look at how we're identifying. A lot of people lose out on opportunities because they don't identify as the type of person who could have or who deserves those opportunities.
Mm.
And that's pretty wild.
Mm. I want you to talk more about that. How much, because you're talking about identity, how much of identity is something that we construct inside of ourselves versus an identity that society creates for us?
This is a really interesting question. And I think that you can probably speak to some aspects of this better than me with your background, because everything that I'm going to be sharing is from my own life experience versus I haven't really studied this. I think that for minorities or for any marginalized individuals, it's a different experience because the society can put more of your identity on you. Like, for instance, if you the one Black person in a neighborhood, then everyone is going to be looking at you like you're the one Black person. That's going to become a huge part of your identity.
Yeah, completely. In growing up, like you're having me think about this whole thing about identity with sort of my racial ethnic identity. I'd always want to have to be around people who had the same identity as I, like Filipino Americans, like in higher education. I want to be able to like gravitate towards that. You know what I mean? But like there came this point, and it probably would have happened faster if I had a transformational coach like you. But there was this point in which when I felt most proud to be Filipino American is when I wasn't around other Filipino Americans. And I was in this group of, predominantly white people or, a group of African Americans where I was super proud to be Filipino American. I don't know where I went from being Filipino American and being proud amongst others to being proud as the only one, like the lone Filipino American. And now just in general, now I'm just proud. Like, I don't care who the fuck's like I'm around. Is that what some of the stuff you do around your life coaching when it comes to, that identity development? And like, what's one thing that someone listening can do to help lean into that identity and really savor it?
So the identity stuff that I work on tends to be the less visible side of things, because that visible side, sometimes society is controlling it for you, not fully, but to an extent. It's that side that you can't see, like this part of you that says, my own story. I used to be an engineer. I was an engineer for 7 years. I went to schooling for that for 5 years, or close to 7 years actually. And so I used to really identify as an engineer. With my engineering identity, I also identified as somebody who was very technical, very logical, and different things like that. I also identified as someone who was not creative. That's something I made up for myself. No one ever told me I wasn't creative. I don't think anyone else ever said engineers aren't creative. But there's all these aspects of our own identity that we create, oftentimes without even realizing. And that's what I love to help people unpack and then rewrite.
What is like one thing that you do like early on with someone like unpacking that, someone sort of going through, this sort of awakening or a certain sense of acceptance, again, like savoring? What are some of the things that you do? Not some of the things that you do. Like if you tell me some of the things that we do, this is gonna be a freaking 4-hour course. But like, what's like one thing that you do very early on with folks?
Well, so very early on with folks, we don't even touch the identity stuff. We get them more in touch with their bodies and their minds so that they can see the way their mind is controlling them and take back control over it.
Got it.
When we get ready for the identity stuff, a lot of it, the first step is just writing down all the ways that they identify, and then spending more time on it too, allowing this to unfold over a couple days, and then taking a look at that list, seeing, are these actual identities or are these just things about me? And then looking at, well, do I want to keep this? Do I not want to keep this?
Yeah. I'm going to break the fourth wall right now. You and I are going to talk tomorrow about how you did on this podcast. These are dope answers, dude. Love this. Are you not weirded out that like we're having a podcast together?
I love it. I've been ready.
Like this is a different form of Bara. Like I love seeing this. Okay, so I want to get back to it, Bara. Talking about engineering. Was that the thing for little Bara, who wanted to have this sort of sense of belonging, community? Was it your dream to go and be this engineer?
Absolutely not.
More than just like I wanted to fit in. What were we dreaming about back then?
Well, I always said that my goal in life was to die happy. And
Even when you were a kid.
even when I was not as maybe an 8-year-old, but probably by the time I was like 12 or 13 or something.
Got
I
it.
always had this sense.
You were thinking about your mortality at 12?
Yeah. I thought about everyone's mortality at 12. I was
Wow.
sneaking out of bed to make sure my parents and my dog were alive.
Wait, no, you weren't.
Yeah.
Really?
I don't know where that came from or when it stopped, but that was one of my nightly habits.
Do you still do stuff like that?
No, now death doesn't stress me out at all. So I
Okay.
just think, it's part of life. But
Because the visual was that I see little Bara coming out with like this tiny little mirror and putting it up to your dog's nose to see if the mirror gets all like. I guess you didn't, but like it's all.
if I had a tiny little mirror, I would have been doing that.
Thank you, homie. Thank you. Okay, so we're thinking about other people's mortalities, right? So what else was going on with that little Bara, whether it be 6-year-old or 12, 13-year-old Bara?
Well, I think as we're unpacking this, maybe what was going on back then that I wasn't conscious of at the time is I was seeing how many people aren't truly happy in life.
Wow.
And that was something I didn't want for myself. So when I said I want to die happy, there were two aspects of that. I was like, I could die today for all I know, so I better be living life to the fullest right now. But also, I could live until I'm 107, so
Yeah.
I want to be setting myself up for a successful future.
Got it. So where did the whole engineering thing come up?
Engineering came up when I was in high school, and I really liked calculus. It was just so practical and just cool. I'm getting the sense that you don't think it's that cool, but calculus is actually really cool and very
I
practical.
loved calculus until I didn't love it. Like that's basically my story. It was organic chemistry was the one that set me off. But like loved calculus. Were you like the erector set person who had like little tinker toys type of thing? Or is that my way of like over conceptualizing and over generalizing like the engineering societies?
I had Dr. Dreadful sets, so I was manufacturing in my little lab different candies and monsters and sodas and stuff.
So this really was the gateway to you becoming an engineer.
It may have been.
Yeah.
Also, I think a really good science teacher, and then later in life, a science teacher that I just couldn't stand and I had to prove wrong.
Got it. I think someone in your family is an engineer, right? Isn't it your dad?
Yeah, so
Okay.
I think that's eventually what led me there is I liked calculus, and I asked my dad if he knew who uses calculus, and he got really excited. He said, Bara, engineers use calculus, and he was an engineer. He said, if you go into engineering and you do well and you graduate, I will buy you a car. And I said,
What?
okay, sign me up.
Okay, if the car wasn't there, would you have signed up?
Maybe.
Maybe not.
It's hard to know. I mean, the car was a pretty good selling point.
But in terms of like me getting to know you over the past couple months, it did feel like at the time that engineering might be a good fit for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it made sense. It wasn't just about this car, but he said, this really makes sense with what you want to do. I think it's what you'd enjoy. Also, I lived a really cool life. I mean, I got to grow up in Indonesia and the rainforest and go on hikes through the jungle every weekend and
How dope
travel
is
to
that?
places like Bali or Thailand or South Africa instead of like New Jersey.
Got it.
Because my dad was an engineer in the oil industry. So all
Got
of this
it.
was motivating
Okay.
for me too.
Yeah, so it not only feels like engineering is a great goal, but also the quality of life that you were living is something that you wanted to move forward and maintain, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
there's
And I
maybe
wanted
there's
to
a
make
little bit of freedom.
difference.
You wanted to make a difference. Yeah. I actually feel very similar to you, with my parents growing up in the medical field and There was a point when I was younger because I'd go with my dad when he was making his rounds in the hospital, and like all the nurses were like, "Oh, are you gonna be just like your dad? Like when you grow up, you're gonna be a little doctor." Like dad was always like, "Oh, yes, yeah." And one of the things that I thought about in retrospect was really coming to this place where, as a younger person, I was trying to make decisions about me as an individual, about what I wanted to do. And then, like, I grew up in a very collective household where it was like the decisions you make impact the family unit. So to be very aware of that. And again, like this idea of third space, like, do I go to this place where I follow my heart? Do I go to this place where I follow my family's heart? Or is there something completely out there? And what happened was that I I ruled it as, well, they're the grown-ups and I'm the kid. And so I'm sure at some point in my life, when I become a grown-up, I'm going to realize what they were thinking all along. And what had happened as a result of that was there was this weird pressure. There's this weird pressure to like get it right. And I didn't want to fuck up, you know? And I'm not guessing that that may be something that you had gone through yourself. But again, I could see people coming to you looking for a transformational coach and they're stuck. Is that something that you've seen either in your life based on the engineering choices that you made, or based on what I'm telling you right now, or based on like some of the clients you've seen?
Yeah, absolutely. Two big things that you mentioned right now I see a lot. One is this fear that you're not going to make the perfect choice. And so you have to have all of this information to do things completely right. This is something that can happen to me if I'm not careful. And if I'm not like doing my practices, I can slip into that mode where it can take me a long time to do anything in my business because I need to have it perfect first. This like when that perfectionist energy takes over and becomes a negative thing because it's unmanaged. Another thing that I've seen a lot is people think there's this binary of I can do what makes me happy or is fulfilling, or I can do what is going to make me successful, whatever success means for them. Or
Yep.
that binary can look different ways, but it's like they think they have a choice of doing what they want or doing what's going to set them up for the best life, never considering that they could create this whole new life for themselves. Maybe it's something that hasn't ever been done before. Maybe there's probably are other people doing things like that, though, that they just might not be exposed to.
So good, Bara. Yeah. And as we're talking about this, I kind of see this trap that you're setting up, or this illusion of the choices that we make. It doesn't, when we choose one thing, it doesn't mean that we're not choosing the other. It can mean that I choose both. I choose the things that make me happy personally, and then I choose the things that make my family happy. And there's a way to do that where one doesn't sacrifice the other, and for me, it took me, like, I'm in my 40s. It took me being in my 40s to get to that place. And I sometimes see myself again, like you see yourself, on that illusion of, oh my gosh, I have to give up this one thing to be happy in the other area. I see that a lot in the happiness stuff that I do, Bara, where someone will come in being like, I just want like hedonic happiness. I just want to savor a grape or something right now. That's hedonic. And then like the eudaimonic, did we ever talk about this? The eudaimonic side is I want to live a good life, right? And people are like, well, if I have to live a good life, then I have to give up all the feel goods. I have to give up the skydiving, and I have to give up the sex, and I have to give up the rock and roll. You don't have to. You can do both. And that's what I'm getting from the conversation about this, Bara.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a really cool book that my first life coach introduced me to, Designing Your Life. I think it's called by, I think, Bill Burr. A couple guys at Stanford wrote this book. And
that sounds like an engineer.
It is. And I think I needed that at the time because I wasn't not open to the woo at that point in my life. I was seeing myself as this very technical person. And I had to see this data that these people went out there and they created lives with everything that they could want in them. When I met with this coach, I had We started our agreement when I was thinking about leaving my engineering career, not knowing what I wanted to do next. And my goal was for her to help me figure out my next career. And I thought there would be like a list of items that I could choose from, and I'd have to pick one off of that list. That's the way I'd lived my whole life. And she opened my eyes to say, hey, you're not stuck with this list. You're not stuck inside this box. What do you actually want? Figure that out first. And then you can create the life that's going to give you what you want.
Was that difficult for you to go through answering those questions that she gave you?
Well, yeah, I couldn't even answer them at first. So we had a 5-session agreement, and by session 4, she checked in and said, hey, you had said you wanted to pick your career. Is that still what you want? I think she could get the sense that I wasn't ready for it. And I said, absolutely not. How am I supposed to pick what I want to do with my life when I don't even really know who I am or what I'm interested in? Because before, I was letting that identity define me and what I was doing, you know?
Yeah. Well, so how did you actually get to a point where you could answer those questions? I'm sure there's someone listening right now being like, okay, she was frustrated. She was given a set of things to answer and she couldn't answer it. How did you get to the point of being able to answer it?
A couple things. One was by trying things out, and another was by getting more in touch with my intuition.
You gotta tell me about both of them. Like, talk to me about what you tried out.
Well, I kind of wound up on this whole spiritual journey after that. I decided to take more time. I was in a fortunate, privileged situation where I could do that. Not everyone can. So I was wandering around by myself on this spiritual journey. Like, this healer sounds cool. Let me go to their class. Let me try this thing. I'm going to read this book. Just really kind of wandering around like a happy chicken. Like,
What was the one thing that started like changing things as you were trying out other things, or as you were trying things out? The happy chicken. Anyone who's listening to this right now, she's like looking all over the place. What was the first one where you're like, dude, that was badass?
meditation and mindfulness were huge. Those began before this, but I got really into that during this time and started putting more time and energy into it.
Yeah.
And then there was sorry, go ahead.
No, not at all. Finish, please.
There was also a particular energy healer that I met, who I went onto her table as one person. I walked off, I guess the same person, but it was like I was in an entirely different world. I was able to experience things very differently, and I had let down this wall that I've been keeping up between me and other people. That was really transformational, because now I could invite in new opportunities and experiences.
Wait, can you do that right now? Because, can you do that? Like what this person had done for you?
Some of my clients have similar experiences. Sometimes.
Holy
yeah.
Hey, are you picking up what I'm throwing down here? Are you digging the Joy Revolution podcast? If so, I invite you to subscribe on this platform. Now, if you want more, I have an online community called The Underground. It's free to sign up. In there, you'll find mini courses inspired by podcasts like this one. You get to connect with other community members. I'm in there. The link's in the description. Let's get back to the episode. Oh, holy cow. Well, I do think before I even move forward, if you're loving what Bara's talking about right now, I want you to go to Bara, BARA co.org. And there's a whole bunch of cool stuff in there when you hit baraco.org/podcast. Let's get back to this idea of meditation that you're talking about. We both have ADHD. There was a point in my life where I could do that, but there is so much swirling around me right now that as much as I try to do it, it doesn't feel like it has the same like potency with me. I do other things for that practice, but what about people who have ADHD, or I know there's also some folks who meditation actually makes it worse. Some of the spiraling go further. How did you get to lock in to that? Were you already on your ADHD practices, or what? It was just easy for you to do?
It was not easy at all. So one thing was that I started very small. So I was told, if you think you can meditate for 5 minutes, start with 2 minutes.
Got it.
So I started with 2 minutes until I was really comfortable with it, and I built it up. And I do want to quickly touch on something you said, that for some people it makes it worse. I think if you're
Mhm.
one of those people, then maybe pushing forward with it might not be in your best interest. It might be a good idea to work with a coach or meditation teacher, a therapist or something like that.
Yeah, that's
But
a
if
good
you're
call.
Yeah, and if you're not in that situation where it's like goes into some terrible triggering spiraling.
Yeah.
Marc, you've had this experience. My favorite tool now is reps, positive intelligence, and that style of mindfulness.
I absolutely love that. I want to go into that for in a second. I also just wanted people to know, like, yes, we are not mental health folks, and we are not telling you to get off of any medication or any therapy that you're going through. I think on TikTok we're supposed to say this is for entertainment purposes only. This is just a me thing. I was working with somebody and I could not get the meditation to work, and like essentially everybody was around me was swearing on. I mean, I come from a positive psychology background. A person worked with me, and it started by looking at a candle, and for some reason that ended up working for me, and then I was able to push through those things. Yes, PQ, emotional intelligence, like has helped me big time, and I know that you're a coach, you're trained as a coach in emotional intelligence and PQ. Talk a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, so I'm trained as a coach in positive intelligence,
Hmm.
PQ. And
Sorry, positive intelligence. Yeah.
right, yeah. And the cool thing about the way you access mindfulness through positive intelligence is you focus your awareness on your physical senses. And so the practices that are introduced through the positive intelligence program are short typically, and
Oh
they're
yeah.
really focused on the senses. So like for instance, anyone listening to this now, almost anyone who can practice this right now, just taking two fingertips and rubbing them together with enough tension that you can feel your fingertip ridges. If you're driving, you need to keep your awareness on the road. But if you're in a safe situation, whatever extra awareness you have that you can safely bring, try to bring all of that awareness to your fingertips. Your mind will wander off. That's completely normal. Expect that. And when it does, just bring it right back to your fingertips. And then if we had more time, we could go into other things like notice the sounds around you right now. Anyone who's listening to this could notice some of the qualities of my voice. Notice the speed of my voice. Notice the pauses in my voice. Notice the raspiness in my voice. Notice the pitch and how it changes. Focusing your awareness on those things is something really easy that you can do anywhere. So you don't have to go sit somewhere really quiet, and you don't have to commit to, okay, I'm going to be here for 10 full minutes doing the exact same thing, because you can switch from the fingers to the voice to your breath, which can make it a lot more accessible for a lot of people. And I imagine if this is something that you might try bringing back in right now, you've got all this other stuff going on. So just saying, okay, I'm going to be quiet for 10 minutes might feel impossible to you right now. Being quiet for 2 minutes might be impossible right now. But maybe rubbing your fingertips together for 20 seconds, that might be something you can do.
So good. Yeah. I love the way that the program is set up, from like, there are super short modules, and then you can go and choose sort of your own adventure, and it goes up, it kind of tiers up in terms of how much you want to invest in terms of time investment. Yeah. At first it was painful to get through some of those things. And then next time, like there's this awesome, like the founder is hilarious and stuff like that. So it just makes it even more fun to watch these things. And yes, I do think that having a coach who actually is talking to you through this is just awesome. I got my app and I got my coach, right? Let's talk about this engineering thing, right? Because ostensibly you reached the highest form of happiness in terms of like, wait, by the way, did you get the car when you became an engineer? Did that go down?
I did get the car.
I love it. I love it. So here you are, early age, you just wanted to fit in. You're getting a little bit older, you've got those tinker toy types of things, and here you are now, you've made it. You're recognized by your family. You are the engineer that you thought you would be. What did things look like afterwards? Because I know you had at least one job in the, you still got the skills, but you're not an engineer by trade anymore. So what was going on there?
So I made it to this point. I had wanted to work for this particular company for like 7 years. It took me at least 7 years of applying for them finally to accept me and for me to get that job. So it kind of felt like I made it at that point. And it was a cool job, corporate world, good money, cool office. When I got to travel, I'd be in like the nice 4-star hotel. It felt really good. My dad really respected me, and we were able to connect over it because it was in the same industry that he was in.
Mm.
I had friends, and life was grand. I loved my first position that I was in with that company. Went through a couple I didn't, but the last one that I was in, I was really liking it and really enjoying it. And when I got quieter with some more meditation and asked myself some deeper questions, I realized that I wasn't aligned with like who I truly am. My actions weren't really aligned with it. If that makes any sense. So this career that I pursued was in the oil industry.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought I was doing a lot of good by being in this industry because energy is really important. We need to be producing energy for everyone. Right now, we depend on oil for that. It's important that people who care about the environment in the oil industry, otherwise we might have some problems, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I realized at some point that as an environmentalist, there are a lot of better things I could be doing that were more aligned
really brutal.
with my values, right? And it was like I never even asked this question before, justified it. I was trying to create this particular life. So I was looking for all the reasons that it would work. I was creating the identity around it. And then later when I was able to separate from some of that stuff, I said, wait a second, what am I doing in this position? And what's the rest of my life going to look like? Said that end goal seems really nice. Like that end position of being the health and safety manager sounds really great. Health, environment, and safety manager, I can make a big difference, and that role will feel good. All these roles in between that and the one I have now, I don't want to do that stuff. Maybe I should make a change.
Okay, so what I'm hearing here is this sort of questioning route showing up, a reflection saying, how much do I really value freedom? The freedom to go and travel and have, have some of the privileges that you had growing up, to be able to go through the rainforest whenever you want. And also work for a place that's kind of like fundamentally against like one of your values. Like that does feel like it does feel like a hard thing, but it also feels like you were strong enough with your values to see like this is not alignment in any way, shape, or form. Like what did that look like? That turmoil look like?
Well, eventually I was, once I even asked that question. But beforehand, I was stuck in that binary, So I was like, okay, if I want these things, if I want the money to travel and all this, this is how I do it.
Yep.
And then eventually I was like, wait a second, I'm not aligned. I need to fix this. And then I also realized there's not just one way to do this. There's a whole bunch of ways.
So what were some of the considerations?
Some of the considerations for leaving or for what I wanted?
Yeah, well, in terms of, there's a whole bunch of ways to get to the same outcome. Like, what were some of the things that you were thinking through?
One of the things that I was thinking at that point in time was that the most important thing I could do for the world was help people to become more mindful and more compassionate. Because I'd seen how mindfulness and compassion had transformed my life and my relationship with others and helped me to see others in a more loving way and to bring the best out of other people.
Love it. And you know what's hilarious? No, it's not that hilarious, but like what's interesting is that you called that in. Empowerment and inclusion, holistic health and mindfulness, happiness and mindset, connection and relationships, navigating transitions and change. That all feels like what you just said.
Yeah. And so I was in a really privileged position where I had a lot of savings from being single, not having kids, working in the oil industry, like not having student debt because I had the privilege of my parents paying for my school and giving me a car, you know?
Hmm.
And a severance package. I was able to volunteer for a layoff during COVID. It was amazing. So I was in this position. I didn't have to figure out the money piece right away. And I could just say, like, okay, I'm going to pursue what really matters to me. And then I'm going to let that come and I'm going to trust that it'll work out. And
Oh, the trust. Yeah, sir.
yeah, the trust is huge. I think most people would really benefit if they had more of it. And I also just can't not say that my situation was different because I didn't have any mouths that I had to worry about feeding.
Completely.
I know that that's an added stressor for a lot
Completely.
of people, but I think most people can take a lot more steps and open up to more uncertainty than they're willing to.
Mm.
I was in a safe, secure place to open up to a whole lot of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I know sort of the story that I come from, to go from full time to all in on yourself. My goodness, was I stressed out. Because in working in higher education, there were things that I assumed weren't going to be issues. I had people always in my office. My calendar was booked. And so when I went and started my own company, I realized, oh shit, like I actually have to do stuff to get people to come to my virtual office. And another thing that I see a lot of folks in our field do is you don't have to make the quantum leap right away. You can set that up from a side, as a side hustle until it becomes the full-time hustle. I know that you work with people in their own in businesses, right? How do you work with them on either taking the leap? Like there's massive fear that comes, right? Where someone's like, "Dude, what if I fail? What if this? What if that?" I see PQ helping, but also as someone's listening to this right now, like how can you help them ally their, I don't know if ally is the right damn word. How can you help them not suppress? How can you help them get rid of the fear at least long enough to make that decision to create momentum in their new business or in their business in general?
So first, I want to go back to something that you were just talking about, which is like, this is another place where people invent a binary, where they think, oh, I have to leave this job in order to have this happiness and this fulfillment. A lot of times that's not true. And you can create that even in your current role. Sometimes it just involves setting your own boundaries, changing things in your personal life. A lot of times it involves having a conversation with the person that you're working for. That's something that I help people do, is to figure out what they want and how to have that conversation in the right way. So I just wanted to say that because some people listening to this are probably like, oh, I'm not ready to leave. Like, I'm just going to shut this thing off. And no, you don't have
And
to
that's
do
good.
that
Yeah,
at all.
that's all good too. Yeah. And again, with that, it does sound like mindfulness comes into play, whether you're ready to take the shift into a new spot or like you're talking about, like to re-fall in love with their job again. I can't, Vera, I'm so glad that you weren't around and weren't my coach back then, because I needed to be pushed from the nest, in order to take that massive action. And no, I don't want to know what my boundaries were. I just wanted to leave. But my boundaries were seriously fucked up. Like we expect you to work on this Saturday because there's a Smash Mouth concert going on for homecoming. And I'm like, dude, like I've got a little kid, I'm in a PhD program, and like this will be dinged on me. And I am acting like the whole like, woe is me, look at the world and all that's happening to me versus what's happening for me. But also at the same time, like I needed to get out of a situation. And so if anybody's listening, Bara Co, I have a feeling that there might be some good stuff in there. And also maybe getting in touch with you, Bara.
Do you want to go back to that question about?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Man, so you going back to all the earmarks and stuff like that. Love it.
Well, no matter what is going to be the right decision for someone, whether it's taking the leap or whether it's not, and working to bring more fulfillment into their current situation, which is often the case. One of the most important things people can do, I think, is to shut down all of these negative voices that are constantly playing in their head.
Yeah. Talk about that.
In the PQ world, the positive intelligence world, and should say I'm a positive intelligence coach. I do not represent the company, but they call those negative voices saboteurs. These folks did a ton of research and used factor analysis and got it down to finding that there's 10 saboteurs that are responsible for all negative thoughts, negative feelings, negative emotions. And they're things like the judge. Everyone has an inner judge, right? That's everyone's top saboteur. Things like the avoider, this voice that shows up in people's head that's like, hey, well, if we just don't deal with this, maybe it'll go away.
Yep.
The pleaser, imagine some folks listening are familiar with that. Like, oh, let's just do what we can to make these other people happy. Their happiness is more important. That's ultimately going to be better for me. Sometimes a pleaser shows up by saying yes to too much stuff, by taking that assignment and giving up your Saturday and your time with your kid to do whatever they need you to do at the Smash Mouth concert. When ultimately it's going to be bad for you and for them, right? Because you left that employer like running and screaming, and maybe not for that pleaser, you could have worked things out way earlier. Chances are not with your situation, but you never know, right? Voices like restless, that's a really big one for me and for a lot of people with ADHD. It's always looking around for something better that we could be doing. All of this stuff, it just wastes a ton of your time. It's bad for your relationships. It's bad for your personal fulfillment. And it wastes your time. Because if you're thinking about what you shouldn't have said yesterday and what you could say differently, and you keep replaying that conversation over and over and over, you could be spending that time actually connecting with that person you had that weird conversation with, right? Fixing things, building your relationship. You could be sleeping. You could be doing something fun. You could be working on something fulfilling and that matters, or just getting your work done, you know?
Yeah. I love this conversation. You're mixing your story and like some of the things that you're learning. I love it. I love it, Bara. You made the switch, right? You had some time to think about what it was that you wanted to pursue. Obviously, like you are pursuing something that is very, very salient for you. One of the top things with mindfulness and happiness, PQ stuff. What did that look like? Like, you know, whether it was the first couple months, the first year, what did it look like moving from a place where, hey, like when you're working as an engineer in a place there, you got a lot of zeros in your check. You know, you get paid a pretty good amount. Don't want to like knock you off. That's people pleaser me. No, I'm going to get right to it. Right? Because that what a PQ coach would have me do. How was that first year? What were the
Well, it was rough and it was scary, especially the first few months, because during the first few months, I was in this privileged situation to like walk around like this chicken, just bobbling from thing to thing. But it got scary sometimes. I mean, my sense of identity was crumbling. I think that I unknowingly tied some of my sense of self-worth into like my paycheck, you know? I was obviously valuable because I was making well into the six figures, you know? I am obviously valuable, and so are you and everyone who's listening to this, like regardless of how much you're making, or the amount of money we're making has nothing to do with that. But once I let that go, I was respected by my dad because of these things. I thought, right? So this is interesting because some of this stuff is true. Some of it's stuff that I made up in my own head.
Yeah.
I remember thinking that my dad didn't respect me that much and didn't respect this new career path, and then finding out that it was just my own story for the most part. Sure, he had some concerns because he wanted me to have security, and he thought that, you know, engineering is a great way to go because it was a great experience for him. But I made up all of this other stuff related to it.
Wow. Yeah.
Also, I saw myself as this logical person, this technical person. Suddenly I was like into manifestation and different things that I never would have thought. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I was like, who am I? Are my friends going to like me anymore? Who do I talk to about this stuff? And so that part was pretty scary and wild. Eventually, I found a spiritual therapist / spiritual mentor. And I was able to work with someone consistently be checking in with and guiding me. And that's part of the reason why I went into coaching eventually, is so most people can't afford to be like, oh, I'm going to go talk to this healer and try this thing and try that thing, whether it's from a financial or a time perspective. And they can't afford, maybe even emotionally, to be in this state of like, well, I don't know, is this person taking advantage of me, or is this real? Like, am I, is this a cult? When I had those questions, eventually I could be asking them to my spiritual, like, therapist, and like talking through them with someone else. So I think that all of that was a little wild, a little messy. For the people who work with me now, it's not, because I had that experience, and because I've dipped my toes in all of these things, and I've been able to see what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, that's awesome. I wanted to touch base on something that you were talking about in terms of the stories that we make up in our head. I had a great conversation with my therapist about it a couple years ago. And the conversation went along the lines of, if what's in front of us is like this 100% way of understanding things, like let's go and let's look at only like 5% of the total viewpoint. And like what we do is we look through that hole, that 5%, and then we make up all the other shit. We create stories. We think somebody's against us. We think this is the way that it's going down. In reality, we're just making all of those stories up. And I don't want to call it the true fact, because even in looking in this 5% hole, we interpret it against our own biases and our the way that we take in the world. And I do think that that's a big thing for all of us. Essentially he said, I haven't seen anyone in the history of mankind not make up stories about what's going on in the other parts. However, a spiritual journey, which is what you were talking about, is a place in which you allow yourself to be open into, okay, the parts that I don't see it, but it could be this. It could be that, absolutely. I absolutely love that. I want to ask you this. How do you balance your ostensible analytic thinking with sort of this intuitive wisdom that you've been seeking, especially the last couple years of your life?
Yeah, I try to allow my intuition to guide me in my personal life mostly now, because it knows more, right? I've read a lot of books. I've done a lot of studying, but I only have so much time to read so many books and to do so much studying, right? My intuition can like access this whole field of knowledge that's out there. And so I try to lean more into that for my personal life. But I also understand that many people do need the science and need the analytical part to even just allow in some possibilities. I was like that.
Yeah,
I started meditating when I saw the science and the facts about how much it helped people focus. And then I thought, okay, maybe this could help me with my ADHD, because this isn't just some weird woo-woo thing that people are doing, sitting around being quiet for a while. Like, there's data that this helps.
Yeah.
So when I'm sharing things, I also often study it too, so that I can give people the scientific perspective. But I only dive in usually as deep as I need to for their understanding. Sometimes I'll refer them to the research or the book if they want to go check it out.
Completely.
Or if I just get really excited, sometimes I'll go down a rabbit hole, and that's fine as well.
Love it. I just wanted to let you know with that last question. Got you. It's not a binary thing. I'm just joking. But, at the same time, it really isn't a binary, right? That whole idea with, like being analytical, like I guess scientifically, versus wisdom, you don't have to give up one for the other as well. There's a way of thinking called holographic thinking, right? In which it embraces the analytical thinking. It embraces the heartfelt space and what you're like. I don't know about this, Bara, but when I go and try to think through some pretty difficult discussions, I say, what is my heart saying? And then I'll say, what is my gut saying? What is my intuition telling me to do? Because oftentimes the intuition does not have any analytical merit in our decision making. And I think it's a big deal, especially given the fact that we see neurons now moving from your brain to your heart and to your gut. All these things are so technically, I guess it's all science too, you know. But I love the way that you deconstruct that, and I love the fact that you've been able to work as a pure analytical person, kind of in a space that's more like that. And now that you're in the spirituality space, you know what I'm talking about. Like now that you've opened up to that type of thing, you get access to new ways of knowing and wisdom. I don't know if that makes sense for you, but like it does sound like you have made a lot of intuitive choices in your life where people might be like, "What?"
Yeah. It does make a lot of sense. And one of the challenges in the beginning of this whole journey for me when I left the one thing and wanted to do something else was not trusting my intuition. And I think a lot of people listening might be in this state where they're like, yeah, but how do I know if it's my intuition or if it's my mind or if it's just a bad idea, you know?
Yeah.
And what I found, what I think is important is to look back on our lives and see all the times when our intuition has served us really well. For instance, the last career move that I made with that corporation that I was working for was to move from Houston to Southern California. It was like this, I just had to do it. I didn't exactly know why. The week I got there, COVID shut down the country and couldn't imagine how I would feel if I was still trapped in this like concrete city away from family and the people I cared about the most. Like it was my intuition that brought me into this different situation. And there's been a lot of times in our lives where everyone can look back and they can say, oh, I did this thing, I wasn't sure why, and it helped me out. And then to start allowing our intuition to guide us with the little things, like intuitive dressing. Like that's just like, who cares if I don't dress completely appropriate, like for this day, if I'm a little bit cold, it's not going to kill me, right? So like, let me just like pick out what I'm going to wear instead of thinking through everything. I used to think through every single thing. Like it was an intellectual exercise all the time, which is just
you
exhausting.
must have been so burnt out at the end of the day. Yeah.
Right, yeah. What am I going to eat? Like, well, this has this many calories and this much protein, and it's sometimes that matters, but a lot of times just pick the thing that you want to eat in that moment, you know?
Is that what you did in picking your partner?
Yeah, I guess you could say that in some ways. I mean, there were certain qualities that were really important to me to have in someone. But then in the actual moment, I was like, I don't know, this just feels good. Let's do this. And it was the least intellectual of like any relationship that I've been in recently. Well, one of the least intellectual ones. And everything about it is like way better. It's interesting. I'm like, oh, well, this isn't exactly maybe what I would have like written down on this list if I was asking someone to like draw my partner, sculpt them from scratch. And this is one of my favorite things about them. So I'm sure glad that I didn't let all that head stuff get in the way.
Dude, that's awesome. That's awesome. And this is called a segue. Because I want to ask you, because another topic that you work with people on is connection and relationships, you know, and whether it be from your own life, whether it be, you know, even the interactions that you have had. I consider you a good friend, Bara. And maybe, you know, it's just sort of this, like you talked about starting this at an epoch in 2020 where connection suddenly like was thrust in the forefront of things, you know? And so when you're looking at things like connection, when you're looking at the ways that we carry ourselves with other people, relationships, what are the things that you're seeing come up in your coaching practice or in just sort of the daily challenges that you see your friends going through?
One of the biggest challenges when it comes to connection is, again, those voices in our heads, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It might be judging the other person. It might be judging yourself. It might be this voice that says, oh, I didn't text them back and it's been 2 days, so now I just can't text them anymore. You know?
Do you feel like when it comes to relationships, do you feel get into? Oh, I already know what your answer I think is going to be because I'm going polarized on you right now. But do you think that there's relationships that are established with like grace and ease and joy, you know? Like, does every relationship have to have those hard components? where you're trudging together, you're working on things, you're making things happen for rather than having the ease and flow of things.
Oh, I think the ease and flow is
Yeah.
that's where it's at, you know, and that's what
Okay.
we should all strive for. And if someone doesn't have that in their relationship right now, I don't want you to think like your relationship is a failure. That might be something that you can get to. And it might take some work to get there, but it doesn't necessarily have to take this like hard grinding kind of work. That's where I think a lot of people can mess themselves up because if you're like putting this intense, unpleasant energy into creating something good, you might just keep getting more of that intense, unpleasant energy. So the question is,
Completely.
how can we with ease create this thing that we want?
Yeah. Yeah. And I see the person in front of me, they see me, this is going to be easy. And I see that in my coaching practice too, not just with like the people who I date or my family and all that kind of stuff as well. I do think that I agree with you. I feel like loneliness is becoming an epidemic, if it hasn't already, you know, where a lot of people are feeling disconnected, you know. I don't know. I know you're highly conscious and you're spiritual. You talk about woo-woo stuff, so let's go there for a second. Like, what are some of the things that you see changing as we move from this like 3D world to a 5D world? Because as I'm looking through this, inclusion, mindfulness, holistic health, mindful business, happiness, mindset, connection, relationships, that's all 5D.
Yeah. Yeah. I know you love the 5D language. I like thinking of it like sometimes new Reiki training that I've been doing, it just talks about the quantum field as something we can
Yeah.
always access. But
what is the quantum field for someone who's not isn't like familiar with that, the quantum field?
What it is technically, I can't speak to that so much, but what it is for me is this place where it's not a place. Let's actually just forget about those terms. What I think that I'd love everyone to strive for. I'm going to say that over. What I would love for everyone to strive for is to see the interconnection of all beings on this planet, to see the oneness. We are all made of the same stuff. And some people believe that we actually like really are the same stuff, that there is no separation. I'm going to tell you, Mark, you and me, like doesn't have to be any separation between us. A lot of people look for that, but if I just look for all the goodness in you, I'm going to be connected with you so much better. If I look for the goodness in politicians, etc., my life is going to be better. It's not going to take away discernment. I think that's a big fear that people have, that like, well, then we're going to vote someone terrible into office or whatever it is. No, you don't have to do that. You can still have awareness of reality, but your experience is going to be better. And so is your interaction with them if you are looking for what's good within them.
Wow. That's huge. Manny, like add the applause sound right now as she's she's talking about this. Actually, our engineer Manny is banging on the window right now, and he wrote on a piece of paper, have her play the game. I don't know how far you've listened into these episodes, Bara, but Manny will often choose guests to play a game with them. I don't see anyone who's ever passed this game. So like, yeah, but he wants you to play.
Let's play.
Is that something that you'd be up for? Is play something you'd be up for, my friend?
Let's do it.
Okay. So this round, Manny just simply wants you to complete the sentence. He's curious at how you embody joy. And you can complete the sentence with like one word or go into like full paragraphs if you want to. Is that cool with you? Okay, Bara. All right, complete this prompt. Joy, taste,
sunshine.
Sunshine? Manny has opened the roof of the engineer's booth, and there's a sun ray coming right on his mouth, and he's licking it. He's licking the sun ray. 1 point for Bara. Who would have thunk? Who would have thunk, my friend? Okay. 1 point for Bara. Next question. Joy, Yeah.
Slash freedom.
Okay. Manny is opening the door to his expensive executive engineering suite right now. It opens up. It opens up to an ocean that is he's doing this. He's wafting it, but he's flying through the air, which he's saying is his freedom. Like I don't know how you do it, Bara, but 2 points, 2 points for you, my friend. Wow, this is better than like 99.9% of the people who've ever been on this show. So let's just keep it going. Joy looks like he is smiling right now, and a single tear is running down his cheek. Another point for you, my friend. 3 points. Like this is no one has ever gotten here. Keep it up, my friend. Keep it up. Joy sounds like
Cheering.
he's hearing cheering right now. And he's saying, no, joy does not sound like cheering. Minus 1,000 points, Bara.
To me, it does. To me, it's like an internal cheering, like just like, woo, yes. Like if we let our joy out, that's what mine would sound like.
I love that answer. Manny, he's taking off another 1,000 points for trying to argue with him. You are at 1,997 points in the negative. I told you, this is the hardest game to play in all of podcast history. Okay, last one. Let's see if we can get just like 1 point here. Let's make this like salvageable. Last question. Joy.
$3,000 points.
Lifting his
Cheering.
aviator glasses. He's reaching his arms out. And he's hugging himself. Positive 2,000 points, my friend. You have won the game by what? 1 point, 2 points, 3 points. Congratulations. You won the game. Just like you're winning at life. Just like the clients that you take in are winning at life. So now you're coming into my territory. This is the extra credit question, Bara. This is what has taken us, 6 months of getting to know each other for you to answer this question. I don't know if I've ever talked about this with you, but I practice a joy revolution concept. And the joy revolution is really sometimes being at a place, and I don't know if you felt this, I've felt it quite a bit, especially leaning into like some woo-woo spirituality stuff. Sometimes the joy revolution, and by the way, okay, you don't have to be into woo-woo spirituality stuff to feel a joy revolution. Sometimes the joy revolution is just simply walking through life and like your heart is full and it gets overflowing. It overflows. And I kind of see you going like this. Those joy revolutions that I live for, you know? Then there's also a joy revolution where you're using joy, positivity, not in a toxic way, but in a way of a leadership leadership role where you can help create social change in the environment based on joy. So I'm going to ask you what your joy revolution is, Bara, and you've got the mic. So what's your joy revolution?
I don't know if I understand the question here.
Okay, yeah. So I'm going to ask you what a joy revolution is and what your joy revolution is. And essentially a joy revolution is 2 parts or more. The first part is sort of having this internal feeling where the heart is you're overwhelmed inside with joy. You're full of joy. You're exuberant. You're ebullient, right? Or, so that's an internal state. The external state of a joy revolution is that you can use joy as a means for changing history for the better. You're using joy to get people collective, what is it called? A collective joy. And you can create change that way rather than like creating change in anger. Does that make any sense? Okay. So what's your joy revolution, Bara?
I think my joy revolution is looking for joy in daily life and all the small things, allowing myself to feel it and then sharing it. And I think we underestimate the impact of sharing it. But if you're smiling and suddenly someone else is smiling, suddenly their next conversation goes better and that spills over onto someone else. It has a huge impact. I used to have a moment of joy within myself and share it on my Instagram, which was really powerful for me.
Nice.
And if anyone goes to my Instagram, you can still see those in my highlights. I haven't been using Instagram as much because I found that that was actually taking a little bit of joy away. But it was really cool to hear from people when I would share a moment of joy, simple sometimes as, oh, a car let me in to traffic today, and that brought me joy. That would affect them and cause them to look for more joy in their daily life. So it's feeling it, it's really experiencing it for at least a couple seconds and sharing it.
Absolutely love it. This hour has flown by, my friend, and I've had a blast with you. Before we sign off, remember, there's a whole bunch of good stuff. If you go to baraco.org/podcast. Again, it's Bara, BARACO.org/podcast. We've got a whole bunch of stuff in there. I believe you're doing the 5-minute meditation that everybody's going to get as a result. There's also this cool stuff where just engaging with the website every month, Bara, you give a free coaching session away.
Yeah. So whoever goes to that link will get access to a free 5-minute PQ exercise like we were talking about. That'll help cut down that, step out of that overthinking and those negative voices into your most positive self. And you can enter to win a free full-on coaching session, and I'll pick a winner every month. This might change in the future for listeners who are listening to this like several months down the road. But if you go to that link, I'll have something there for you.
It in the show notes as the offerings evolve. Bara, I've had a blast with you today. So I hope you come back soon. Like, let's do this one more time again. On behalf of Bara, on behalf of Manny, I'm Marc Cordon. And for your sake, for my sake, for our sake, for goodness sake, start your revolution. Start it in love, in light, in shadows, and in joy, baby. All right, this wraps up another episode of the Joy Revolution podcast. Thank you so much for listening. And since you made it this far, go ahead and hit subscribe. Now, if you want to hear more podcasts, or if you're ready to engage with a community who will support and challenge you, if you're ready to start your own Joy Revolution, head on over to my online community, The Underground. The link is in the description. It's free to sign up. I've got a bunch of resources in there, including my own Joy Revolution course. So until next time, I'm Marc Cordon Creative. Dig deep, and I'll see you in the underground.